All right, guys, I think we know that one of the most stressful things about doing extensions is not even putting the hair in or ordering the hair, it's figuring out how the hell to color the hair. Now, I would love nothing more than to be able to give you actual formulas, but the thing is, you know that we all use different color lines. Yavanka and I luckily use the same one, and we use Evo. We love it. Honestly, I've become obsessed with it. I came from Redken, and I love shades, but I do think it's an incredibly difficult line and very drying. So we're gonna give you some of our favorite tips and tricks for whenever we are coloring wefts that hopefully will help you as well. So as I said, Redken shades, although I love the line, I do think it is very difficult to use on extensions. And I'm someone who was trained in Redken and Paul Mitchell. So I take that for what it's worth. I will say, if you are going to use Redken, shades specifically, remember it is very drying. Honestly, for hair in general, especially extensions. And I have found that it does take a little bit odd on extensions. It tends to go very pink and mauvey, or way in the other direction and almost gray. So my biggest recommendation is always, if you are unsure, if you're new to the line or you're even using any new hairline, period, and even if it's not ours, just in general, please take a 1-inch little piece of the hair you're trying to color and test it out. Because the last thing you want is to go hard and all of a sudden you have fucked up an entire pack of hair. That's not fun. So what are other things that you've seen and experienced that you can give them little tips and tricks for coloring hair? Okay, so one thing that we love using, because we both use Evo, maybe you want to explain this because it took Arnie a minute to get it when I speak about creams and liquids. Maybe you should explain it. You know what? Yes. Once again, this is one of those things that we always say, Australian hair culture and vernacular and verbiage is not the same as American. So here is something very unique about Evo. Imagine you have a bottle like Redken Shades, and then you have a tube of permanent color, right? Evo has both of those, a cream and a liquid, but with that, the cream, the tube itself, you can actually make permanent or demi-permanent, right? So I tend to use them both each way, depending honestly on the longevity that I want. If you want something that's a little more, I say translucent, think about tea versus coffee, then that is when I would use the liquid, which is the little Redken Shades bottle type tube. So whenever we're talking about liquids, that is what we're talking about, is the one that looks like a shades bottle. When she talks about— Not a developer. No, not developer. That developer is developer. When she says liquids, she's talking about, and it's hard to say demi or permanent because the cream can be both. So just know, whenever Yavanka says liquid, she's talking about the tube, like you would think of Redken Shades. Whenever she says cream, it's an actual cream color. So just remember that. But the cream in Evo can be demi or permanent, kind of you can almost think of it like Dia Richesse. How Dia Richesse, although it is a demi-permanent, it is a tube, it's not the little bottle. So just know, honestly, this is something that took me a long time to get used to talking to Yavanka, because she'd be like, a cream and a liquid. And I'm like, are we talking about the bottle, the tube, or the developer? So just know we are specifically talking about the color itself. So go ahead.
Well, hopefully that makes more sense. Thank you for explaining. So here's the reality of it. It really is difficult to tell you exactly what to use for each client, and you're just going to have to do a couple and it will make more sense. But ideally, if I'm wanting the color to hold better, then I'll always go to creams. If I want a little bit more of a translucent look, then I'll go to liquids. Again, if you want to add low lights in, I just find that creams work better, because otherwise you've got the slipping and the sliding of the foils and it tends to slide out. So again, you can use both, but generally you're just going to have to work out with your client. If they want the color to hold a little bit more, then you use the creams, and as it washes out, it just lasts longer.
Yeah, I love the longevity of creams with Evo. And I will also say, something that made me nervous having come from shades is when you're using things that are very ash central, you have to fully dilute in shades, because if not, it's going to be blue or gray. I have found that if I've ever had a client that's come back and it's either been a problem with sunscreen where all of a sudden it's turning peachy, or maybe it faded weird, or they had hard water, I have taken the 0.1 or the 0.11s in Evo, used them just straight and raw, and they have been stunning.
Stunning. This is another thing, and this is where I'll go into what's worked really well for curly if you want to warm up the color. So it took me a minute to figure this out, but there's two things that I like to do. So if you want to warm up, say you're using something like Oak or Haven and you want to warm it up, I will use Evo have a beautiful color conditioner, direct pigment in the hair. So a lot of the time before you actually put it in your client's hair, wash it out. We use Malibu Sea Goo Remover. Is it Goo Remover? Not Goo Remover, Undo Goo.
There we go.
There you go, I was getting close. So just give it a really good wash with Undo Goo. You can put the color pigment on there, direct dye. We just use the gold and then we put our desired color on. That is also when I would use liquids for that as well, because it just holds, well, I wouldn't say it holds better, but it takes gold better, because you don't want it also to be too dense sometimes with creams. That's what you want to be careful of when you're working with the lighter shades. But with darker shades, if you're working, you can use creams, because again, it is going to hold a little bit better. But in saying that, just going back to my other thing that I like to have up my sleeves, Evo just released about a couple of months ago. They released the color additive, or the gold additive.
Yes.
So that's also been working really well, where I use liquids and I'll use like a 9.3 or a 10.3, and then I'll put a couple of drops of the gold additive, and that just warms it up beautifully as well. But I would wash the hair first a couple of times before you put that color on. And then again, if it goes sideways, or if the color doesn't take to what you want it to, what you can also have just in your toolbox, in your toolkit, is just have Malibu Sea Color Remover. The CPR works really well, and also the Evo has a color remover. It looks like bleach, but it's not bleach, and I find that usually that works really well with 10 vol.
Yep.
It actually works better with 10 vol than water. You can mix it with water, but because Evo Developer have, I think the ingredient is like avocado oil or coconut oil. It has something in there that just keeps the hair more nourished and moisturized if you're using it with 10 vol.
And I will say that's one of my things about using Evo, which is not like this is not like a brand promotion for them, but I have found that as I use them with extensions, the extensions never feel dry. They don't almost get like, you know how, let's just be honest, sometimes when you're using shades, it is more drying where you're like, damn, it's feeling a little bit brittle. I've just never had that with Evo, regardless of using liquids or creams or any of the developers. And that is something that I've loved, and my clients really like how it smells too.
It does. It has a really nice, because their line is low tox. It's no tox free, but it is one of the most low tox lines that I have used. But you just got to also give the developer, give it a really good shake, because of the ingredient of the oil in there. It just ends up emulsifying a lot better and helping the color hold better as well.
So, and guys, like we've said before in other videos, with morning hair and with YL, you can go through, you can color them, you can lighten them, you can perm them, but there is a big asterisk to that. We recommend, if you are not comfortable doing any of those things on extensions first, cut off a little piece and test it. It is no different than all of the rules we have about strand testing when there's an actual client sitting in our chair. I just think sometimes we're like, it's not the client, who cares? No, care. Because that can be potentially a very expensive mistake to make. And as we've said in any video you've seen us in, if you have questions, let us know. We would love nothing more than to help you. I know there have been times where I'm like, hey, Ivanka, something didn't turn out right. And she was like, send me pictures. I will help you formulate. We want you to win. We are here on your side. And I know, like, coloring extensions for the first time, or using a new color line or new hairline.
Can be so scary.
It is
so
horrifying.
scary.
Yes. And so one thing to remember, guys, is you can lighten, you can darken, you can bleach, you can perm all of the hair, whether it's morning hair or Wild Genius, the textures you can. But please remember that straight hair will take that differently than curly. So the rules of doing a strand test are still exactly the same. And I'm also gonna have Yo talk about the fact that, like, I'll be honest, she's been a little bit crazier on the chemicals she's willing to put on the wefts. She's been crazy about it. So you talk about that.
Yeah, so straight hair, you can bleach. So if a client comes in after about 5 months of wearing it and they've been using suntan lotion, sunscreen lotion, or tanning lotion, we all know that it does stain the hair a little bit, especially sunscreen is really, really hard to get out, but we have often bleached the hair. Again, it has to be done at the client's own risk, but using a wet balayage with like 40 vol for 10 minutes just lifts up blonde hair especially, just nice and brighter and cleaner. Have I bleached dark hair? I've gone in and lightened someone's hair by using 10 or 15 vol as well, just by doing some low lights. But again, if you're going to go to a level 4 or 5 or even 6, you might only get one level of lift. But blonde hair is obviously going to lift a little bit more brighter, but you definitely can. That's the best part, that you can bleach our straight hair. Would I do it on curly hair? I probably wouldn't mess around and bleach.
No.
Curly extensions. We've said we can perm it, you can re-perm it. Just bear in mind as well, we've had one of our stylists re-perm our Asian hair, and that was a client had worn it in for about 5 or 6 months. That was our colour in oak, which is technically blonde. It's double processed. Did she perm it? Did it work? It absolutely did work beautiful. But again, she did it on Asian hair. Would I do it on Indian hair? I probably wouldn't do it on Indian hair because it is a little bit more drier. But like we said, what's the worst case scenario? The client's going to obviously be prepared to get new hair. So if you're in the middle of the lifespan of your hair or towards the end of the lifespan, why wouldn't you experiment? Have fun with that. Because what's the worst that can happen? They're just going to get new hair anyway.
Yeah, but definitely make sure if you're going to be doing a larger chemical service like that, whether perming or heavily bleaching, you need to tell the client, there is a chance this could not work, and then you have to buy all new hair. Are you prepared for that today? If they say no, then do not do it. Like, that's just something you have to be clear about. And if you're wondering, if you're like, damn, well, I want to have like a level 6 highlight or something like that, and you are unsure, I would recommend buy a lighter weft to color down as opposed to buying a dark weft to then go through and lighten. Guys, the options really are endless. It's a matter of you being comfortable, confident, and testing these things out. Because I'm going to let you know, would I take a bright blonde hair weft and perm it? I probably wouldn't, because my expertise with perms is not there. But the fact that they did it and they worked tells me, like, okay, this obviously works. So I might just not be there yet, and that's okay.
Correct.
So
if you asked me a year ago, actually 2 years ago, if I'd be doing curly hair or perming, I would have laughed in your face. So I've just been that stylist that I'm cautious, but I also like to experiment. And like Ani said, let the client know what's the worst case scenario. If they're prepared to get new hair, that's where I get more balls to try it. And 8 out of 10 times, it's worked perfectly. So don't be scared. Give it a try. Like Ani said, you can always reach out. I'm really good at photos. If you show me a photo and you show me what you're wanting to achieve, I can also help guide you and give you, some recommendations along the way.
love that. And so if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we are more than happy to help you.